My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm 22 years old. Last month, I walked across that graduation stage, thinking it would be the proudest moment of my life. Instead, my father handed me disownment papers right there in the parking lot, calling me a failure who'd never amount to anything. My stepmother smirked while my half-siblings laughed. But when the CEO of Morrison Industries stepped up to the microphone and called my name as their newest executive hire, their faces went completely white. The same company my father had been desperately trying to get a contract with for years. What they didn't know was that this graduation ceremony would expose 15 years of lies, manipulation, and stolen opportunities that had been hidden right under our family's nose. Before I tell you exactly how karma came full circle that day, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're ready to see how family betrayal turned into the sweetest revenge, hit that like button and subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you won't believe what my father had been hiding all these years. Growing up in the Martinez household meant being constantly reminded that I was the mistake. My mother died in a car accident when I was 7, and within 6 months my father had remarried Patricia, a woman who came with her own 2 children, Marcus and Stephanie. From day one, Patricia made it clear that I was an unwelcome reminder of my father's past life. The favoritism was blatant and cruel. While Marcus got enrolled in private soccer leagues and Stephanie received piano lessons, art supplies, and designer clothes, I was told that money was tight. When I asked for help with school supplies, Patricia would sigh dramatically and say that some children needed to learn the value of hard work. Meanwhile, she was booking family vacations to Disney World that mysteriously never included me because I was too difficult to travel with. My father, who had once read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike, became a stranger. He never stood up for me when Patricia made cutting remarks about my appearance or grades. When I won the science fair in 6th grade, he missed the ceremony because Marcus had a soccer game. When I made honor roll, there was no celebration, but when Stephanie passed her driving test on the 3rd try, they threw her a party. The emotional abuse was systematic and deliberate. Patricia would forget to pick me up from school, leaving me waiting for hours while she remembered to collect her own children on time. She'd prepare elaborate dinners for the family, but leave me a peanut butter sandwich claiming I was too picky for regular food. When relatives visited, she'd introduce Marcus and Stephanie proudly as the kids, while referring to me as David's daughter from his first marriage, as if I were some distant relation. High school was when the financial discrimination became impossible to ignore. While my siblings got new laptops for their studies, I was told to use the library computers. When prom season arrived, Patricia took Stephanie shopping for a $500 dress while informing me that formal dances were frivolous expenses and I should focus on my grades instead. I worked part-time at a local diner to buy my own prom dress from a thrift store, and even then no one from my family attended to see me off. College applications revealed the depth of their sabotage. While Marcus and Stephanie had college funds that Patricia mentioned frequently, I was told that I'd need to figure out my own education. Smart girls find scholarships, Patricia would say with a sweet smile that never reached her eyes. What I didn't know then was that my mother had left me a substantial education fund that my father and Patricia had been quietly using for my siblings' expenses. Despite everything, I was determined to succeed. I worked multiple jobs throughout high school, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and spent countless hours applying for every scholarship I could find. When acceptance letters started arriving from prestigious universities, my family's reactions ranged from indifferent to openly hostile. Patricia actually seemed annoyed that I'd managed to secure enough financial aid to attend college, as if my success somehow diminished her own children's achievements. The morning I left for college, my father barely looked up from his newspaper to say goodbye. Patricia was cheerfully packing care packages for Marcus, who was heading to a state school with a full ride funded by what I now know was my inheritance money. There were no tears, no proud parent moments, no promises to visit. I loaded my few belongings into my beat-up Honda Civic and drove away from the only home I'd ever known, feeling like an exile rather than a young woman starting her future. College became my sanctuary and my battleground. While my roommates received regular care packages and visits from loving parents, I worked in the campus cafeteria to afford textbooks. During holiday breaks, I often stayed in the dorms because going home meant returning to a place where I was treated like an unwelcome guest. I threw myself into my studies, joined professional organizations, and networked relentlessly, driven by a burning desire to prove that I was worth something even if my own family couldn't see it. My business administration program at Northwestern University became my escape from the family that had written me off. While other students partied and enjoyed typical college experiences, I was building something bigger. I spent my freshman year working 3 jobs, tutoring struggling business students, managing social media for local restaurants, and cleaning office buildings at night. The money barely covered my expenses, but every dollar I earned felt like a victory against the people who'd told me I'd never amount to anything. By sophomore year, I'd caught the attention of Professor Williams, who taught advanced corporate strategy. She noticed that I was consistently outperforming students who came from wealthy families and had every advantage handed to them. When she offered me a research assistant position, it felt like the first time an adult had seen my potential rather than my circumstances. Professor Williams became the mentor my father never was, challenging me intellectually and pushing me toward opportunities I didn't even know existed. The research project that changed everything started as a simple analysis of mid-sized companies struggling with digital transformation. I spent months studying Morrison Industries, a family-owned manufacturing company that was losing market share to more tech-savvy competitors. Their CEO, James Morrison, was a third-generation owner who understood traditional manufacturing but was drowning in the digital age. My research proposal outlined a complete restructuring of their customer relationship management system, supply chain optimization, and digital marketing strategy. Professor Williams was so impressed with my work that she encouraged me to submit it to the university's annual business innovation competition. I spent weeks refining my presentation, working 18-hour days to perfect every detail. The night before the competition, I called home to share my excitement, hoping that maybe this achievement would finally earn some recognition from my family. Patricia answered the phone and listened with obvious boredom as I explained the significance of the competition. "That's nice, dear," she said dismissively. "Marcus just got promoted to assistant manager at his internship. Now that's a real accomplishment." The competition day arrived, and I presented my Morrison Industries case study to a panel of judges that included successful entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and business school deans. When I finished my presentation, the room was silent for a moment before erupting in questions and praise. I'd won first place in a $10,000 prize, but more importantly, James Morrison himself had been in the audience and approached me afterward. "Young lady," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "you've just solved problems we've been wrestling with for 3 years. Would you be interested in an internship?" That handshake changed the trajectory of my entire life. Over the following months, I worked directly with the Morrison Industries executive team, implementing the strategies I'd outlined in my research. The company's efficiency improved by 30% within 6 months, and their digital customer engagement tripled. James Morrison became more than a boss. He became the father figure I'd always needed. He saw my work ethic, my innovative thinking, and my determination to succeed despite my circumstances. When I mentioned that I was working multiple jobs to pay for school, he quietly arranged for my internship to become a paid position that covered my remaining tuition. When I graduated summa cum laude, he offered me a full-time position as his executive assistant with a clear path to management. But the real game changer came during my senior year, when James pulled me aside for a conversation that would reshape my understanding of business and family dynamics. He'd been following my academic progress and was impressed not just with my intelligence, but with my resilience. "Sarah," he said, "I'm planning to retire in 5 years and I need someone I trust to help transition this company to the next generation. I don't have children, and my nephews have shown zero interest in the business. Would you consider joining our Executive Track program?" The Executive Track program was Morrison Industries' fast-track leadership development initiative reserved for employees they considered potential successors. Only 3 people had been selected for the program in the company's 50-year history, and 2 of them were now running major divisions. The program included specialized training, mentorship from industry leaders, and rotations through every department to gain comprehensive understanding of the business. Meanwhile, my family remained oblivious to my achievements. During rare phone calls home, they'd update me on Marcus's entry-level marketing job and Stephanie's community college progress as if these were Nobel Prize-worthy accomplishments. When I mentioned my internship at Morrison Industries, my father actually laughed. "That old company," he said dismissively. "They're probably going out of business soon. You should look for something more stable." What my father didn't know was that Morrison Industries was the same company he'd been desperately trying to secure a contract with for his small construction business. I'd seen his company name on a list of potential vendors noted for their consistently late bids and subpar proposals. James had mentioned the Martinez Construction Company as an example of businesses that didn't understand how to adapt to modern procurement processes. The irony was delicious, but I kept this information to myself, sensing that it might become relevant someday. As graduation approached, I felt a mixture of pride and sadness. I'd achieved everything I'd dreamed of and more, but I was doing it without any support from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. James Morrison had invited my family to a special dinner he was hosting for graduating interns, but when I extended the invitation, Patricia claimed they had prior commitments and couldn't possibly reschedule. The prior commitment, I later learned, was Stephanie's boyfriend's cousin's birthday party. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, and I should have been on top of the world. I'd finished summa cum laude, been accepted into Northwestern's MBA program with a full scholarship, and had a guaranteed executive position waiting for me at Morrison Industries. But as I put on my cap and gown that morning, all I could think about was how I'd be walking across that stage alone while watching other families celebrate their children with tears of joy and pride. My family had agreed to attend the ceremony, though their enthusiasm was notably absent. Patricia had complained about having to wake up early on a Saturday, and Marcus had grumbled about missing his weekend plans. When they picked me up from my apartment, the car ride was filled with Patricia's running commentary about how long and boring these ceremonies always were, and how she hoped the parking wouldn't be too expensive. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Northwestern's commencement was held in a gorgeous outdoor amphitheater, with hundreds of proud families filling the stands. As I sat with my fellow graduates, I spotted my family in the crowd. My father checking his phone repeatedly, Patricia filing her nails, and my siblings looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The contrast with the beaming, photo-snapping families around them was stark and painful. When my name was called, I walked across that stage with my head held high, accepting my diploma with the knowledge that I'd earned every bit of it through my own determination. The applause was polite but distant. No whooping family members, no proud shouts of my name. Just the formal recognition of an achievement that felt hollow without anyone to share it with. But the real shock came afterward, during the reception. I was mingling with other graduates and their families when I noticed my father talking animatedly with another parent. As I approached, I caught fragments of their conversation that made my blood run cold. "Always knew she wouldn't amount to much," my father was saying. "Patricia and I have been carrying her financially for years. Honestly, we're just relieved to finally be done with that responsibility." The other parent looked uncomfortable and quickly excused himself when he saw me approaching. My father didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. Instead, he turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, and completely devoid of paternal affection. "Sarah," he said formally, as if I were a business acquaintance rather than his daughter. "We need to talk." He gestured toward Patricia, Marcus, and Stephanie, who were standing nearby with matching expressions of smug satisfaction. Whatever was about to happen, they'd planned it together. Patricia pulled an envelope from her purse with theatrical flourish. "We've been discussing your future," she said with false sweetness, "and we've decided it's time for you to become completely independent." She handed me the envelope, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were official disownment papers, legal documents that formally severed all family ties and financial obligations. "We're cutting you off completely," my father said matter-of-factly. "No more family connections, no more emergency contacts, no more pretending we're responsible for your choices. You're 22 now, and frankly, we're tired of being associated with your mediocrity." The words hit me like physical blows. Marcus smirked and added, "Now we can focus on our real family without having to pretend to care about someone who was never really one of us anyway." Stephanie giggled and said, "Maybe now you'll finally understand that some people are just meant to be disappointments." I stood there in my graduation gown diploma in one hand and disownment papers in the other, feeling like my entire world had collapsed. Around us, other families were taking celebratory photos and making dinner plans, while my family was formally rejecting me in the most legal and final way possible. The rejection I'd felt my entire life had just become official. But as I struggled to process this devastating betrayal, I heard my name being called over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the clear, authoritative voice of James Morrison before we conclude today's festivities. "Morrison Industries would like to make a special announcement." The crowd quieted as James took the microphone. My family looked mildly curious, probably wondering why some random businessman was prolonging the ceremony they were so eager to escape. But I knew exactly who James Morrison was, and my heart began to race with anticipation. "It's my great pleasure," James continued to announce, "that Sarah Martinez, today's summa cum laude graduate, has accepted a position as Executive Director of Strategic Development at Morrison Industries, making her the youngest executive in our company's 50-year history." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as my father's face went from confusion to recognition to absolute horror. Patricia's mouth fell open, and Marcus and Stephanie looked like they'd been slapped. They all knew exactly who James Morrison was, the CEO of the company my father had been desperately trying to work with for years. This moment, right here. This is where everything I'd worked for started to make sense. But if you think this is shocking, wait until you hear what James Morrison revealed next about my family's lies. Hit that like button if you're ready for the truth bomb that's about to drop, and make sure you're subscribed, because this revenge story is just getting started. The secrets my family had been hiding were about to explode in the most public way possible. James Morrison stepped down from the podium and walked directly toward our family group, his confident stride and warm smile directed entirely at me. "Sarah," he said, extending his hand, "congratulations on an outstanding academic career. I'm thrilled to officially welcome you to the Morrison Industries executive team." My father's face had gone completely white. He knew exactly who James Morrison was. The CEO he'd been trying to impress for 3 years, submitting proposal after proposal for construction contracts that were consistently rejected. Now that same CEO was shaking hands with the daughter he'd just disowned, calling her his newest executive. "Mr. Morrison," my father stammered, stepping forward with a forced smile and outstretched hand. "David Martinez, Martinez Construction. I believe we've corresponded about several potential projects." James looked at my father's extended hand but didn't take it. Instead, his expression shifted from warm to ice-cold professional. Ah, yes, Martinez Construction. I remember your company well. The emphasis on well carried a weight that made everyone in our group uncomfortable. Sarah, is this your family? Was I, said quietly, still clutching the disownment papers. Apparently not anymore. James glanced at the papers in my hand and his expression hardened further. I see. How interesting. He turned back to my father with a look that could have frozen hell. Mr. Martinez, I have to say your timing is remarkable. You see, I've been wondering for months how to handle the Martinez construction situation, and now I have my answer. Patricia stepped forward, her voice sickeningly sweet. Oh, Mr. Morrison, there must be some misunderstanding. We're so proud of Sarah's accomplishments. We've supported her every step of the way. The laugh that escaped from me was bitter and sharp. Supported me. You just handed me disownment papers and told me I was a family disappointment. James's eyes narrowed dangerously. Disownment papers. At her graduation ceremony, he looked at my family with undisguised disgust. You know, in 50 years of business, I've learned that how people treat their family members is an excellent indicator of their character and integrity. It's actually one of the primary factors I consider when evaluating potential business partners. My father's panic was becoming visible. Mr. Morrison, surely you understand that family matters are complicated. Sarah has always been challenging. We've done our best, but sometimes tough love is necessary. Challenging, James repeated, his voice rising slightly. The young woman who single-handedly developed the strategic plan that saved my company 30% in operational costs and tripled our customer engagement is challenging. Other graduation attendees were beginning to notice our conversation drawn by James's increasingly authoritative tone. Your daughter James, continued his voice carrying across the nearby crowd, spent the last 2 years revolutionizing our business model. She identified inefficiencies that our experienced consultants missed, developed solutions that industry experts said were impossible, and implemented changes that increased our profit margin by 42%. The board of directors voted unanimously to fast-track her to executive level because her work was that exceptional. Marcus stepped forward defensively. Look, we know Sarah's smart, but you don't understand our family dynamics. She's always been difficult and ungrateful. James turned to Marcus with a look that could have melted steel. Ungrateful. Let me share something interesting about your difficult sister. When she discovered that her academic success qualified her for our executive mentorship program, the first thing she asked me was whether we had any opportunities for small construction companies. She specifically mentioned Martinez Construction and suggested that we might consider giving local family businesses a chance to bid on our smaller projects. The blood drained from my father's face. She mentioned our company. Oh, yes, James said, his smile becoming predatory. She spoke very highly of her father's work ethic and suggested that we might be able to help a family business grow. Based on her recommendation, I personally reviewed all of Martinez Construction's previous proposals. Want to know what I found? My father was visibly sweating now. Patricia grabbed his arm, her knuckles white with tension. The crowd around us had grown as other families sensed drama unfolding. I found proposals that were consistently 20% over budget timelines that were unrealistic by industry standards, and safety protocols that didn't meet our basic requirements. But here's the really interesting part. I also found evidence of inflated labor costs and materials charges that suggested either incompetence or deliberate overbilling. That's impossible, my father protested, weakly. Our proposals are competitive and honest. James pulled out his phone and scrolled through it briefly. According to our procurement department's notes, Martinez Construction has submitted 14 proposals over 3 years, all of which were rejected for various compliance issues. The most recent proposal submitted just last month was for a warehouse renovation that you quoted at $240,000. Our contractor completed the same job for $95,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Other graduation attendees were openly staring now, and I could hear whispered conversations about the drama unfolding in front of them. But here's what really concerns me, James continued relentlessly. Sarah mentioned that she'd been working multiple jobs throughout college to pay her expenses. She told me her family wasn't able to help with educational costs because money was tight. Yet your LinkedIn profile shows Martinez Construction completing several major residential projects worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Either your business is failing due to mismanagement, or you chose not to support your daughter's education despite having the means to do so. Patricia tried to interrupt. Mr. Morrison, you don't understand the full situation. I understand perfectly, James cut her off. I understand that you have a daughter who graduated summa cum laude while working multiple jobs and dealing with family rejection. I understand that she's brilliant, hardworking, and ethical, qualities that apparently don't run in the family. And I understand that you just formally disowned her on what should be one of the proudest days of her life. The crowd around us had grown larger, with phones appearing as people began recording the confrontation. My father looked like he was about to be sick. Here's what's going to happen, James announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. First, Martinez Construction will never receive another opportunity to bid on Morrison Industries projects. Second, I'll be sharing my concerns about your business practices with the Better Business Bureau and the State Contractor Licensing Board. Third, I'll be recommending to my colleagues in the industry that they review their own experiences with your company very carefully. But James Morrison wasn't finished. He looked at the disownment papers still clutched in my hand, and his expression shifted from angry to absolutely furious. You know what bothers me most about this situation. Sarah never once complained about her family or asked for sympathy. She simply worked harder than anyone I've ever met, maintained perfect grades, and built an impressive professional network, all while apparently receiving no emotional or financial support from the people who were supposed to love her. Unconditionally. My father made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Mr. Morrison, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We love Sarah very much. This disownment thing, it was just meant to encourage her independence. We were planning to surprise her with stop, James said sharply. Just stop lying. I've heard enough. He turned to address the crowd that had gathered around us, his voice projecting clearly across the reception area. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption, but I think there's a valuable lesson here about recognizing talent and character when we see it. Sarah Martinez, he continued, gesturing toward me, represents everything that's right with the next generation of business leaders. She's innovative, ethical, hardworking, and resilient. Despite facing what appears to be significant family adversity, she's achieved academic excellence and professional success through her own merit. Morrison Industries is honored to have her on our executive team, and I predict that within 5 years, she'll be running divisions that generate millions in revenue. The applause that followed was spontaneous and overwhelming. Other graduates and their families were clapping and cheering, and I felt a warmth I'd never experienced from my own family. People I'd never met were congratulating me and expressing admiration for my achievements. Patricia looked around, desperately realizing that their public rejection of me had backfired spectacularly. Mr. Morrison, she said desperately, surely you can understand that family relationships are complex. We never meant to hurt Sarah. We just wanted her to be independent. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. Independent. She's been independent since she was 18 years old, working multiple jobs to pay for her own education while you supported your other children. Let me tell you something about independence. Truly independent people don't need to tear down their family members to feel successful. Marcus, who had been silent during most of this exchange, finally spoke up. This is insane. You can't destroy our father's business because of some family disagreement. I'm not destroying anything, James replied calmly. I'm simply ensuring that Morrison Industries maintains its standards for integrity and professionalism. We don't do business with people who demonstrate poor character, and frankly, what I've witnessed here today raises serious questions about your family's values. Stephanie burst into tears, finally realizing the magnitude of what was happening. Daddy, do something. He's ruining everything. My father looked at me with desperation in his eyes. Sarah, please. You have to understand, we were just trying to motivate you. We never meant for this to happen. Can't you talk to Mr. Morrison explained that this was all a misunderstanding. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of emotional neglect and abuse, after formally disowning me in public, they wanted me to save them from the consequences of their own actions. I looked at the disownment papers in my hand, then at James Morrison's supportive smile, then back at my family's panicked faces. Actually, I said, finding my voice for the first time since this confrontation began, I think Morrison understands the situation perfectly. You made your choice when you handed me those papers. You said I wasn't really family anyway, so why would you expect family loyalty now? James nodded approvingly. Sarah, there's something else I think you should know. Last month, when I was reviewing potential vendors for our upcoming commercial development project, I specifically looked into Martinez Construction because of your family connection. The project is worth approximately $800,000, and I was prepared to give your father's company serious consideration despite their previous proposal issues. My father's eyes lit up with desperate hope, but James wasn't finished. However, James continued, after witnessing how your family treats you, I can't in good conscience work with people who demonstrate such poor judgment and character. The contract will be going to Precision Construction instead. They quoted the same price, but have a proven track record of treating their employees and subcontractors with respect. $800,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence for Martinez Construction. My father's face went through a range of emotions: shock, rage, desperation, and finally a kind of broken understanding of what his choices had cost him. Patricia grabbed my arm desperately. Sarah, please, you have to help us fix this. We're family. You can't let him destroy your father's business over a silly piece of paper. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at the disownment papers, then back at her face. According to these legal documents, we're not family anymore. You made sure of that. I gently removed her hand from my arm. And it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was 22 years of being treated like I didn't matter, culminating in a formal rejection on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. The reception was winding down, and James gestured toward the parking lot. Sarah, why don't you join me and my wife for a celebration dinner? We'd love to toast your graduation and your new position properly. As we walked away, I could hear my former family's frantic whispers behind us, probably trying to figure out how to salvage the disaster they'd created. Other graduation attendees were still staring and whispering, and I knew this story would spread quickly through our local business community. James, I said quietly as we reached his car, thank you for standing up for me back there, but you didn't have to destroy my father's business. I never wanted revenge. He smiled sadly. Sarah, I didn't destroy anything. They destroyed their own business the moment they decided that cruelty was more important than character. Besides, in the business world, reputation is everything. Word about what happened here today will spread quickly, and other companies will draw their own conclusions about Martinez Construction's integrity. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my corner office at Morrison Industries, overlooking the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. My nameplate reads Sarah Martinez, Executive Director of Strategic Development, and every morning when I see it, I'm reminded of how far I've come from that broken girl standing in a graduation ceremony parking lot with disownment papers in her hand. The fallout from graduation day was swift and comprehensive. Within a week, the story had spread throughout our local business community, amplified by the cell phone videos that several attendees had posted on social media. The footage of my family publicly disowning me while James Morrison defended my character went viral in our region, generating thousands of views and comments that were overwhelmingly supportive of my situation and critical of my family's behavior. Martinez Construction's reputation never recovered. The combination of James Morrison's public criticism and the viral video created a perfect storm of negative publicity. Potential clients began questioning the company's ethics and professionalism, and several pending contracts were quietly canceled. Within 3 months, my father was forced to lay off most of his employees and scale back operations dramatically. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in our business community. My father had spent years trying to land a contract with Morrison Industries, never knowing that his own daughter was working her way up through the company's executive ranks. His treatment of me didn't just cost him the $800,000 contract that James had been considering, it cost him his entire business reputation. But the personal consequences were perhaps even more devastating for my former family. Marcus lost his assistant manager position when his employer, a family-owned company with strong values about family loyalty, decided they didn't want to be associated with the Martinez family drama. Stephanie faced social ostracism at her community college when the video reached her classmates, and she eventually transferred to a school in another state. Patricia, who had orchestrated much of my childhood misery, found herself becoming a social pariah in her usual circles. The country club ladies, who had once admired her picture-perfect family, now whispered behind her back about her cruelty toward a stepdaughter who had clearly deserved better. Several of her friendships ended when people realized the depth of the emotional abuse I'd endured. The most poetic justice came when my father finally understood what he'd lost. 3 months after graduation, he showed up at Morrison Industries, begging for a meeting with James Morrison. Security called me before escorting him from the building, and I watched from my office window as my father walked away with slumped shoulders and defeat written across his face. He'd finally realized that the daughter he'd rejected was the key to everything he'd been trying to achieve. But this story isn't just about revenge. It's about transformation and the family you choose versus the family you're born into. James Morrison and his wife Catherine have become the parents I always needed. They attended my MBA graduation with tears in their eyes, celebrated my 23rd birthday with a party that felt like genuine family joy, and included me in holiday traditions that Patricia had always made clear were not meant for me. My professional success has exceeded even James's predictions. The strategic development initiatives I've implemented have generated over $2 million in additional revenue from Morrison Industries. And I've been featured in 3 business publications as an example of innovative young leadership. The executive MBA program I'm completing at night while working full-time has opened doors I never imagined possible. More importantly, I've learned to recognize my own worth, independent of family validation. The little girl who desperately wanted her father's approval has grown into a woman who knows that some people are incapable of recognizing value when they see it. Their blindness doesn't diminish my light. It just means they'll spend their lives in unnecessary darkness. 6 months ago, I received a letter from Patricia. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting from years of passive-aggressive notes about chores and expectations. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as an apology, claiming that the disownment had been a misunderstanding and that they'd always been proud of my achievements. She mentioned that Marcus was struggling to find work and wondered if I might have connections that could help. The letter ended with a suggestion that families should forgive and forget, and that successful people have obligations to help those less fortunate. I read the letter twice, then filed it in my shredder. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, especially when the people on the other side are still carrying torches instead of olive branches. The lesson I've learned isn't about revenge. It's about recognizing that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and loyalty doesn't require blood. The people who truly love you will celebrate your successes, support you through struggles, and never make your worth conditional on their convenience. Everyone else is just taking up space in your life that could be filled with people who actually deserve to be there. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced family members who couldn't celebrate your success? Maybe someone who undermined your achievements or made you feel like you weren't good enough despite evidence to the contrary. Drop your story in the photo comments below. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps us realize we're not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, or if you're amazed by how karma came full circle, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more real-life stories about justice being served. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by people who are too broken to recognize brilliance when it's standing right in front of them. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Remember that sometimes the family that rejects you is just making room for the family that's meant to embrace you. Keep pushing forward, keep believing in yourself, and never let anyone convince you that their inability to see your value is a reflection of your worth. Life has a funny way of putting people exactly where they belong, and sometimes the best revenge is simply living well enough that you forget why you needed revenge in the first place.